Yes.
Brian Adams,
Here.
Matt Brewer,
Here.
is Richard Haddock,
Betty Washington? Yes.
okay, and Margaret McCormick.
Here.
Okay,
Okay, with that, we are ready to move on to item number 2, which is the 2020 budget review, and I will turn that over to our city administrator, Bob Condren. Bob?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. If you all will understand and recall, we are in the midst of the coronavirus event right now. And one of the things that we are facing in the near future, just like many other cities, counties, and the state also, are going to be shortfalls in revenue. I have been working, and staff has been working with our finance director, Cami Schroff. We have put together some projections. I should say our finance directors put those together. Thank you. And it tells a rather daunting story just for 2020. And I probably should preface this by saying it's in all likelihood, it's going to be more of a challenge to meet the 2020 budget necessities than it's going to be when we go to plan for 2021. Part of the challenge is that we are already committed to several projects. We're under contract on some things that we absolutely must follow through on. And so I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Schroff. She's done an amazing job of putting together our numbers. And I want to let everyone know that the proposed cuts and reductions that we're looking at here are just the immediate low-hanging fruit. Staff is going to meet again in the coming week to see how we can refine this and cut into the budget a little bit more. Find those savings where we can so that we can balance this budget for 2020. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our finance director, Cami. We're not getting your audio right now. We had a problem with this earlier today with another meeting that we had. Any luck there?
Can you hear me?
There you are.
There you go.
Sorry, when they came and upgraded our computers today, it kind of changed all my settings on Zoom. So, okay, let's start again. Mayor, council member, Cami Schroff, your finance director. I'm gonna share my screen so we can all look at the presentation that was emailed out previously. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so like Bob said, this is just kind of an update to what's going on with the 2020 budget right now. That's what we're really focused on. That's our immediate concern right now, is trying to get 2020 squared away before we start moving on to 2021. I'm calling it the COVID-19 edition. So first off, in 2020, we're anticipating a revenue shortfall for the general fund of 15% for property tax, and then 25% for sales tax as well. Utilities, for the utility funds, we're projecting a 15% reduction in all of that utility revenue. And some of the other areas that we have been advised to keep an eye on are our franchise fees. I've heard some talk about those getting reduced or eventually going away. So that might not be as stable of an income source for us right now. And then also we need to be mindful about how the change in utility usage is going to affect our utility funds. So this can be, there's more individuals at home now, so they're using more, you know, gas and water and storm or wastewater. So how that's going to affect our usage and the amount we're billing, and then the amount we're receiving back from our citizens. So we'll get right into the general fund and what that means for the general fund. When we look at the revenue in the general fund, it's mainly property tax supported. A 15% reduction to those property tax revenues is approximately $100,000. So we'll have a $100,000 shortfall that we're anticipating for 2020 for property tax. For motor vehicle tax and sales tax, we're looking at a 25% reduction. And that's $30,000 for motor vehicle tax, another $85,000 shortfall for sales tax. And then we have some other revenue sources as well. So these would be kind of the tickets that the police department issues, you know, any of the revenue we get in for the courts, and that's kind of all stalled right now. And we also have, you know, some interest on some of our savings accounts. So overall, compared to what we received in 2019, I'm anticipating a $75,000 reduction there. So overall for the general fund right now, I'm anticipating a $290,000 shortfall that we'll need to make up. On the expenditure side for the general fund, oh, sorry, I have two screens up. Again, so here's the revenue shortfalls that I'm anticipating for the general fund. Also on the expenditure side, we have some unbudgeted expenditures that have come up throughout the year. So we'll find ways to mitigate those. So one that you already know about is the increase to the health insurance cost that we brought to you about a month or so ago. So that was about a $42,000 increase there. Our code enforcement personnel was not included in the 2020 budget. So we're covering his salary in the general fund right now, and hopefully we'll be able to move his salary to the stormwater fee as planned in the 2021 budget. There's just some, for the city council personnel budget, it's just when I look at how much we spent in 2019, what we have in the budget is a couple $1,000s less than what our actuals were last year. So I'm putting in a little contingency there. For the COVID-19, we've had some additional expenses as well. So we have the cost for Zoom and all the technology that we've purchased so we can have these video conference meetings. We also have additional PPE and cleaning supplies that our staff has bought. I'm anticipating we spent about a little over $2,000 year to date. I put in $5,000 right now. Depending on how long this kind of goes on for, those costs could be increased. I will say some of those COVID-19 expenses, we may be able to get reimbursed from FEMA. So we'll be looking into that as well to try and get that $2,000 that we've already spent reimbursed. We also have the Huffman Drive design costs. So this is actually an expense that's in the capital budget for 2022, I believe. And we were kind of in talks with PEC about pushing that forward in case there's any opportunities for possible federal grant money. So those would be additional expenses to the general fund right now that are unbudgeted. So in summary, when we look at the expenses that we're looking at adding and also the revenue impact, that leaves us with a shortfall of $466,000 that staff is going to look to try and mitigate. When we look at the utilities, so all of our utility funds across the board, a 15% reduction in revenue, that would be $100,000 for all the utility funds. We also have late fees that could be getting impacted. So for 2019, we brought in $4,400. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. In 2019, we brought in $7,500. And then in 2020, so far this year, we've collected $4,400 in late fees for those utilities. Again, looking at the general fund, if we wanted to mitigate the $466,000 shortfall that we're seeing right now, this slide kind of shows you how much of the budget we would have to reduce. So right now we're looking at reducing at least 20 to 25% of the budget to help cover those shortfalls. So that brings me to the mitigation strategies that staff is looking at right now. So kind of our first step was to really start looking at our capital expenses and our equipment reserve fund, and see if there's any of those big expenses that we can either postpone or not do in order to free up some cash. One of those things is postponing the police department remodel. That'll free up about $30,000. That can go towards the general fund shortfall. We're also looking at the cost benefit of purchasing the public works bucket truck right now. If anything, just postponing it for a little while so we can hold on to that cash for right now till we have more information. The second phase that we've done is we've postponed other budgeted projects. So this includes you know, that we were going to do a mowing contract for about $20,000, and Thomas and the public work guys are really stepping up and agreed to take on that function so we can save that money for this year. They're also doing some of our landscaping here around City Hall that we previously had budgeted to contract out. There's also some budget for facility upgrades here that has to do with some electrical stuff, some cleaning of carpets and painting of the outside facilities that we're putting on hold right now. And then also the strategic plan, just with the way the year's going right now, we don't think it's feasible that we'll be updating the strategic plan this year and are proposing to push it into next year's budget right now. For step 3, I'll be meeting with staff in the next week or so and Bob to just look at ways we can reduce our other contractual and commodity expenses that we have right now. This is when we get into the budget with our fine-tooth comb and really look at our needs and our wants and how we can help mitigate the shortfall we're going to see. So little quick overview and just insight into what staff's working on right now, and I'll stand for any questions.
Kimmy, can you or Bob explain to me how the property tax is impacted for 2020?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of conference calls with the Kansas League or League of Kansas Municipalities. And one thing that they're saying is that the property tax that's paid on May 10th, the municipalities may not receive that for up to 90 days right now. Just because of the state being closed and the county offices being closed and just the whole process of getting that revenue to local governments. On top of that, I heard today that there's only about 36% of the countywide property tax is actually paid through escrow. So as people are laid off and they're having to cut their personal budgets, we're anticipating that not everyone's going to be able to make those property tax payments, or they may actually stop paying on their mortgage for the short term.
Okay, so it's more of a cash flow issue than really a revenue issue.
Right. So, well, it would be both. Yeah. I mean, if we're not able to
the property tax hasn't changed for anybody. It's just that the payments may be delayed.
The payments may be delayed.
It will eventually pay those, even if somebody goes into foreclosure.
Yes.
Right? Is that correct, Bob?
That's correct. I mean, we anticipate those property taxes will be paid eventually, but there may be a delay in getting those distributed to all the governing bodies and agencies that are due those receipts.
Okay, so it's more of a when do we collect the money as opposed to whether we'll get it at some point.
Hopefully so. That's
Right.
we hope that's the end result.
Okay, all right, good, thanks.
Cammy, this is the mayor. I've got a question. How are we positioned as far as funds to make payroll and obligations that we've got in the next 60 to 90 days?
So we have a really healthy fund balance right now. So we're definitely able to still meet all our obligations. You know, even I would say if we make these reductions we've already talked about, and if we make even more reductions, I don't see any reason why we couldn't even make it through the year. So I'm definitely confident we can make it through the next 60 to 90 days as we start to know more.
Thank you.
I had a follow-up to Richard's question on the delinquency on the payments. I think this will be probably markedly worse than 2008, but we did experience that same thing back then where it took several years to catch back up. And I don't think we ever caught fully up, but it took 2 or 3 or maybe 4 years. I think we can probably use that as some kind of an indicator, though again, I think it may be worse. As you guys continue analyzing what other mitigation strategies you can find in the budget, it's obviously an answer you can't provide right now. But what I'll want to look at is how once we've done all these things, all the things you've already identified, and additional things you identify, how does that leave us as far as our ending balances and all the different funds, and how those match up to the GFOA recommendations?
So, I mean, obviously my goal is to finish the year with an equal amount of expenditures as the amount of revenue we brought in. It's definitely something that I'm setting up my files and the information that I can share with the directors on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis, so we can all watch what we're spending compared to the budget and the revised budget that we end up making. If we make these reductions and then additional reductions, I mean, I think there's still a chance we'll spend more than we actually bring in for this year, but with our healthy fund balance, it'll set us up in a good position to start 2021.
Okay, cool.
This is the mayor again. If I could advise all council and everyone that's involved in this meeting, if you would mute your microphone except for when you're talking. You would go ahead and mute your microphones. We're picking up on some people talking in the background. Thank you. Go ahead, Cammy.
Sorry. Does that answer your question, Brian?
It did. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Also, Cammy, if you would unshare your screen so we can see the other members. Thank you.
Oh, there it is. There we go.
There we go. All right. Well, any other questions from council or department heads? Any other things that we need to handle as part of our budget workshop?
That's all I had for this evening.
And that's all I have. And again, I just want the council to be aware that these are the things that we've shown you tonight are the obvious things that really stand out in the budget that are easily accessible and things that we can either cut completely or take a wait and see throughout the latter part of the year. We do expect those revenues to come in eventually this year, but we want to be able to be measured and make those cuts as they're necessary. We don't want to try to get ahead of this too much, but we want to be able to have something in our back pocket to be able to cover all of the anticipated shortfalls that we projected at this point.
Well, if there's no other questions from council, I'd like to just thank Bob and Cammie and all of our staff for the work that they've done so far. And if nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn till 7 o'clock this evening.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn until 7 PM this evening.
I can second that.
Motion by Brian, a second by Richard. Before we cut off, I just want to let you know that there will be a different link that you will need to sign into for the city council meeting. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor to adjourn? Say aye.
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 Okay, motion carries 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. I didn't see Margaret. Was that Margaret? What was your vote?
That was my vote. I
Okay.
said aye.
Okay, I couldn't see yours.
Aye, sir.
Okay, all right. Well, we will adjourn until 7 o'clock this evening. Thank you, everyone.